Welcome back to Open Studio. There's a lot that's going on with this, so I'm just going to jump in pretty much right away. There's a lot of ways to approach this. I could finish up the outside of this, the housing for the light. There's a lot that's going on in this lens here, so I think I'm going to start by kind of working with that. All right, so in this lens there are lines, you can kind of see them, that are running both horizontally and then vertically. Again, you'll see by the end of this, there's a lot going on in here. So it's not so much of just kind of spraying or painting in, the reflective quality in the back of this lens, and then just doing those lines on top. Even though I know that's really what it is, I have to kind of take a step back and just, again, paint what I see. If I really want this to look real and not just a rendition of what I think I see or what I think is there, I just got to kind of really focus in on it. So the way I do it is pretty much like the rest of the painting. I'll come over to the palette and I'm just going to start with like a light gray. So I've got this really nice blue here that's just kind of hanging out. So that's going to be a good base for this because it is kind of a bluish gray. So I'm just going to add some white into that. And again, this wet palette is fantastic because it does keep the paint usable for a long time. So I can jump back and forth from colors that are there. The center of this headlight has kind of just a round lens in it. So I'm going to start there. And again, the idea for me with anything that's really super complex like this is to just start somewhere in the middle value so that I can kind of get a feel for what's really going on. I don't want to commit to the really dark areas first or the really light areas. I just want to kind of get my feet wet essentially with what's really going on here. So I pick a really mid-tone, and that's what this gray really is. Just allows me to kind of get a feel for it, but yet start also to put things in. To get things started. There's a lot of, looks like there was some sort of warm color that was being reflected in this headlight, which I'll also include just because I like it, it breaks it up. And from there, like I said, it's just going to be a matter of kind of doing the same thing across the board. Like those lighter vertical lines, they're almost not painted in. It's almost in negative. So what I'll do, for instance, on this one, I'll paint everything around that opening, around that line, and that's what will create the line, just the negative space that I leave behind. I'll probably lighten that up. There's some really neat reflective white highlights in this too, but for the most part, it's just going to be a matter of kind of sticking with it and picking at it until I get it to where it needs to be. The area I'm working on right now is pretty dark. It's got a really dark reflection in it. But this, again, this lighter gray, I can put this anywhere in that section and essentially not be wrong because I'll be going over it with a darker color anyway. So it's a good chance for me to just kind of mess around with it and see what I can come up with. And the technique usually kind of creates itself. Like as I'm working on this, I'll just kind of find the best way to do the section in a small section, and then by that time I'll be able to repeat it over the whole thing. And that's kind of the way I approach things. When they're really complex and there's so much going on, it's nice to have a place where I can kind of get a feel for what's really happening and then apply it everywhere. And then what's nice is once you do something like that, it's kind of in your mental toolbox. And trust me, my toolbox is pretty mental. But no, it puts it into your kind of list of things that you've done, and it just makes it so much easier the next time you run across something that's similar to it. You'll already have a good idea of how you tackle the last one and what you need to do to get that new one where you need to be. So I decided to do the lens first because I'd have to clean up the outside of this at the end of it anyway. So this way, if I do all the lens work and then just kind of tuck in this circle where the housing meets, then I'll be done. This is so tight and so small, it doesn't really matter. Like I could do the outside, complete this whole housing, and then do the lens, and it would still be fine. But again, it's just more of a judgment call. I still have plenty of the HD stencil that's kind of poking through here. So I'm going to use as much of this as I can. But again, like I keep saying, the idea is to cover all that up. It's essentially the drawing that's underneath, and I don't want any of that to show in the end. So, but I can still see some of it, and that's perfect because it gives me, the idea of what's going on. Now, even though I'm really kind of breaking these little individual micro lenses up, I still keep in mind that there's a line that goes all the way across here like this. There's another one that cuts right through the middle of the headlight. So I got to keep that in mind too, so I don't want to get too sucked into the details and then have those lines be off. That's the other thing too. The lines that are over this side are really dark. There's a nice background color behind them all. So that's good. Now, spending a bunch of time on this lens is not going to be a bad idea. What I find is headlights on motorcycles and cars are really like eyes on portraits. So people really spend a lot of time looking at those. And it's funny, if you ever want to get into it with a car person, they always know, like among everything else that they know, one of the things that people will always know is just by looking at like a set of headlights or tail lights, like what year that car was and what model it was. And someone who knows cars inside now can do that to just about any part, but really the headlights are what people remember, and tail lights are what people remember about a car or a motorcycle for that matter. It really becomes like I said, it's like the eyes of a portrait. So spending a lot of time here on this part here is going to be a good thing, because two reasons. One, people are going to be drawn to this because it's so shiny and reflective, and there's all going to be all kinds of stuff going on in there. But number two, because it's so shiny and clean, it's the only thing on this bike that isn't damaged or worn. So that's really kind of neat. So it has the ability to create that contrast in textures that's going on in this painting, and that's really, really going to be important. That's why I love that there are these like super highly polished stainless parts on this as well. It just does the same thing. It's one of the hallmarks of good design is repetition and variation. So if you have both of those in a design, humans tend to really like that. So they like repeating patterns, but then to have a little bit of variation in there really is a solid design type of, not trick, but technique of creating good design. All right, there are some really nice shapes in here too. So if I get too bogged down in these, essentially these little squares, I am going to kind of go over those lines with a brighter color to kind of solidify them and make them the way they should be. But they are really broken up in the image. It's not just a line that shoots across. It's actually made up of reflections. But it is there. So I'll be able to reclaim some of that, so I don't have to get too lost in these details. I can always pull them back out again. But it's a good chance for me to really get some of these tighter details in now before I really start getting the darker areas in. So I have a frog in my throat today, and I don't know why. So you guys are going to get the Miley Cyrus version of me today. It's not about the journey. No, it is about the journey. It's not about the destination, whatever the quote is. And someone watching this 2 or 3 years from now will have no idea what I'm talking about, but there is a viral video of Miley Cyrus in an interview, and she's at the end of her usable voice. She says a long sentence, and by the end of it, her voice is really grumbly and gravelly, and the internet has taken her to task and had a lot of fun with that video. So anyway, all right, Yeah, lovely. So what's really cool about this, because I went in first with that gray and the airbrush and kind of just fogged in everything, it takes a lot of the pressure off of this stage here with the paintbrush. What I'm doing is essentially what I do everywhere. So I've used the softness of that airbrush to kind of lock in these bigger areas of this medium light gray. So now what I'm doing with the paintbrush is I'm just kind of picking out spots of those and sharpening them up. And now I have the best of both worlds. I have that complete coverage, which would have been really difficult with the paintbrush, all this area up here. And then I have the really, really tight, details down in here, which are really difficult to do with the airbrush. So again, for me, it's all about, using the strengths of each tool and getting them to do what I need them to do. If I could do all this with the airbrush, then yeah, that's great. I'd do it all with the airbrush, but the airbrush just doesn't do these super microscopically fine lines like that. I mean, it can get close to that, but again, I keep saying it, for my work and for what I do, unless you're an airbrush artist, you would have it wouldn't give you any value. It becomes a technical exercise more than creating something for the painting. Because I'm not always going to be standing next to this painting. I'm not going to be able to say, hey, guess what? I did this whole thing with airbrush. There's not a single paintbrush or pencil line on this whole thing. It's all with airbrush. So in the end of the day, when people are looking at this thing, and I'm not there, they're not going to know, nor are they really going to care, probably. So for me, again, it's the strength of the tool. Take advantage of whatever you can to get what's in your head onto that canvas. That's kind of how I look at it. All right. Oh, there are so many nice reflections in this. This is going to be fun. And what happens with this too, it's so complex. Your brain gets kind of shut off. It hits overload mode. And then you just take in the image. You just say, okay, that's the lens from a headlight. But there's so much going on in here that if you stop and really, like, hopefully in the end when I've got this done, someone can just stand here and look at this lens and spend as much time as they want, because they'll just keep seeing more things, more reflections, more highlights, more shadows, just all of it. So that's the advantage of spending all kinds of time on this part right here. It's funny, a lot, and I appreciate it. A lot of people, I get the comment a lot that, I have a lot of patience. But it's funny, I don't look at this part like what I'm doing right now and how long I'm going to take to get this done. I don't really look at that as patience. This is it's just another piece of the puzzle. It's like, I don't know, if you have to walk from here to there, you have to walk from here to there, and that's it. The only way to get there is to walk through it. And what's nice is on that walk, you'll see all kinds of stuff and smell all kinds of smells and meet people. And you know what I mean? That walk is really, it's not a drag. Even though it's a long walk, even though it is a long walk, you don't look at it as, wow, that's a super long walk. You have a lot, like I said, you have a lot of patience. It's just, doing this is part of the whole thing. And it's part of, for me, it's the love of doing this. It's not a hassle. It's not, for me, it doesn't take patience. It's just fun to do. It's just the way that it needs to be done to get it done the way I want to see it. But thank you. I really do appreciate that, that compliment, because I take it as a compliment when someone says that I have a lot of patience. I just feel guilty because I don't feel like it's taking patience. I suppose it's a lot, and I kind of equate this a lot of times. If you enjoy doing, say, like jigsaw puzzles, look at all those pieces in that box, and it's like, like if your goal with a jigsaw puzzle is to just get to the end, you're doing the wrong hobby. You're having the wrong kind of outlook on it. The whole joy is just kind of sitting there, maybe with a friend, and going through the pieces and trying to find this piece, and then the joy of actually finding that piece that you've been looking for a while. And it fits right in there and it feels real good, and you know, all that fun stuff. That's the same kind of thing, I guess. Now, some people don't like jigsaw puzzles. Some people don't like spending 100 hours on a painting, and that's awesome. Again, that's great. To each their own, I guess. But I'm so glad that you guys and girls are here, that everyone's here. It does give me a lot of joy when people connect with what I'm doing. You know, I feel sometimes that, you know, when you work on something, and especially here at the studio, because I'm really kind of cranking here by myself, so sometimes you get lost in the self, like what you're doing, and you don't really understand the impact that it might have on someone. So to then hear about the impact means a lot. So I really, really appreciate that too. I'm feeling unusually schmoopy today, so I apologize for that. It is definitely one of those days, actually. When you watch this one, yesterday was one of those days, so. But I'm filming this the day before it goes live, so. All right. Yeah, I'm feeling really good about that. Everything for me works the same way. It's mid-tone, then a little bit darker, a little bit lighter, and you just keep bouncing back and forth with the values and the details until you get to the very last super bright highlights and the very last really dark highlight or shadows. So that's pretty much the gray right there, and I'm really, really happy with that. It actually went faster than I thought. Excuse me, which is always a bonus. Okay. So there are some neat colors going on in here. Looks like there's a kind of a olivey green reflection that flows through here. There's that brownish orange color that I just mentioned that's kind of in the middle of the lens. So I'm going to put those on here now because those are kind of being reflected by the back of the lens. So if you could take this glass, if you could take the glass reflector off, or the glass, you know, outer piece here, you'd see those, whatever those reflections are in the lens behind. So we're going to do those now because we're going to, once we get the highlights and stuff on it, it'd be tough to put that in. So let me switch to, let's do the olive green first because it's pretty subtle. This airbrush ready. I think what I'm going to use for this is shocker, it's moss green. I love, love, love detail moss green. It's 0059. It's definitely one of the, like if I had to choose like 8 colors and I couldn't use any other colors, this green would be the green that I would pick, you know. As versatile as Viridian is, you know, it's just a super bright green, and it just takes a lot to come back from, you know what I mean, to make look natural. Rarely do you see that Viridian super bright green in real life, but this moss green tends to pop up everywhere. It's just a really nice kind of, it's not olive, it's not sepia, it's just a good color. That's all there is to it. So I'm going to put one drop in the airbrush. There it is right there, just kind of hanging on the edge there. And I'm going to add a little bit of white to this. And I'm probably going to add some reducer to it. The detailed moss green is great, but it tends to really separate out. It's not a very smooth color. So I'm going to add some reducer to this with 4050. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of beating up on the side. See those chunks in there? That's kind of just the nature of the beast. So by adding a little bit 4050 in there and then mixing it up really well, it'll smooth all that out again. And what I'm going to end up with is this kind of really light olive green. I'm going to add one more drop of white. The white is reduced also. The white is reduced 1 to 1. Normally, again, I know I've said this before, normally I don't pre-reduce paints unless I'm going to be using a lot of it. Or I do, the only color or values or whatever, the only colors that I reduce and beforehand are white and black, because I use those a lot for the black and white paintings. I should not be doing this over the painting. I just had a blob of paint kind of splash up. Luckily it hit the inside of the cup, but this big blob of green on the painting would not have worked out well. Okay. So there it is. So what am I doing? pulling the place apart. There it is. So see what I mean? It's like just it's not a brilliant green. It's just kind of a lime green. I want to make sure I'm in a good spot with this. This might be, yeah, you know what? I think this is going to be too green, but we're going to see if it plays well on the gray. That's what I'm kind of hoping. So this green is kind of in the back of the lens over here, like right above. Oh yeah, this is going to be nice. Okay, good. Actually, it's got a lot of white in it. Is that white down? Might be too white. I thought it was going to be too dark, but it actually looks like it's too bright. First, I want to make sure that I'm seeing the green coming out, not white. Sometimes, you know, like it won't mix up all the way. There we go. See what that looks like. Yeah, much better, much better. That's exactly what it was. It just had a lot of the white mixed in the bottom. And then there's a little bit over here too. So I'm just kind of tinting the gray. That kind of hit it kind of hard, but I'm not worried. But see how I just kind of tinted the gray right there? That's really what I wanted. That has got a base of white on there now. It's not going to make a huge difference, but still, we'll leave it. And that's all I need to do there. So I'm going to do the same thing with that orangey kind of brownish color. So I'm going to clear this out and do the same thing with what am I doing? This time I'm going to put reducer in first so that I don't have that white. And this is another cool thing. Since you guys are in with me, I'm going to back this out a bit. You guys are, like I said, you're in the studio. This is what live, I just, you know, turn the camera on and go. This brush really needs to be cleaned out. This is how I know that it's time for spa day for the airbrushes. So when I push this trigger down and let go, it continues to blow air until the trigger kind of by itself just kind of like comes back up. What's going on here, and this happens a lot with the microns for me because I'm generally kind of a mess when I'm spraying. I'm flushing out and paint is getting into this little opening here. If any paint gets into this opening and then ends up back where the trigger is, which is right behind this opening right here, that'll cause this thing to stick like it's doing. So there's paint doing that. So what I got to do is I got to pull the whole brush apart, soak it, clean it out, put it back together, and it'll be good as new. Brushes without this hole, it still happens because right above this thing, the channel that this trigger moves in will allow paint to get back in there too. So if you're messy like I am, and paint gets kind of sloshed around and ends up on the top of the brush and gets down in this little compartment where the trigger is, the same thing can happen. It's not a big deal. For me, that's a good, kind of a good marker for me to say, okay, I got to take the whole thing apart and get these back up and running, because that's a drag having that do that. It's not going to stop me from painting. Like if I really need to get something done, it's just aggravating. Okay. So a little bit of diversion there, but I thought that was good. All right, let's get this brown color in, and then we'll be in good shape. So for this, I'm gonna use just straight up Wicked Brown. I like this because it's kind of a chocolatey brown, and it's just a good overall color. And this will give me that orangey, brownish color right out of the gate. Now, so the orange, orange too, but the greens and the browns, they tend to be kind of rubbery, is the best way I can describe it. So say I had to do the super high, tight detail painting, the colors I wouldn't use were just those colors I mentioned, because since they're so rubbery, they don't tend to want to spray the same way as a smoother color. So what I should have done was put some reducer in there first, but that's okay. So I'll put some reducer in there. I got the brown on the edge there. What I want to do now, though, is I want to kind of tone that brown down a little bit. So I'm just going to add a drop of super reduced black. This is 1 to 20, which is 1 part black to 20 parts reducer. So that's going to give me kind of a little bit darker brown. Yeah, that looks good. Now there is no white in here, so I'm not going to have that same thing happen, where the green had that white that was stuck on the bottom of the brush first, and it ended up coating it instead of acting like a tint. This is all, there's no opaque color in this, so this will definitely do the job. This will tint for me right away. All right, So this color here is mostly right in the center of the lens. And then there's a little bit down here. And I really feel like if it's down there, it's going to be over here too. It doesn't really show up on the photo, but I'm assuming it's there too. So what's going on is, and yeah, we have just enough time. That's perfect. I'll grab the folder for this one. Back you guys up a little bit. This is where kind of a blend of understanding what you're seeing and a blend of just painting what you see. So when you have a lens like this, you guys are looking at an angle, but you get the idea. If the glass wasn't with all the lines, if the glass with all the lines wasn't there, because it would reflect upside down, what you're seeing is, say there are trees, you would see the trees like this. They'd be upside down. So you'd see the ground here and whatever is in front of, the foreground is here. So it's the image, but it's upside down. So what's going on in this painting is you're seeing something that's in the room across from the bike that's brown. So I'm assuming, so you can kind of see it in the gray that's here, that arc. That's the floor, what's being reflected right in front. So there's something greenish in front of this bike, but then there's something brown along, almost like the horizon of what you can see if you turned around backwards. So that's why I put the brown over here, because I'm assuming that whatever is there is along the edge here, and it just kind of runs across. Even if it isn't there, it reinforces that upside down reflection, which is what we know happens with a lens like that. All right, that was a long explanation of a little smear of brown. But again, you're here for the whole rundown, so I'm going to give it to you. All right. Next up, again, there's something dark that's really being reflected, plus the actual bulb, which is right in the center behind this. I guess they're all lenses. There's just a circular lens inside this bigger lens. So a little bit of everything going on here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on that. So that's just a darker gray. So I'm going to still use this blue because I really like it. It's like a steel, like a steel gray. And again, I'm going to start right in the center because it seems to be the most bold right here. And again, just build it up. This isn't the darkest by far, but again, it allows me to kind of work this. When I do get the really super darks, all I'm doing is taking it that last little bit of the way. I'm not trying to make this as dark as it needs to be right now, because again, if I do that and I screw it up, if it's not quite right, then I got to fix it. This way I'm just kind of sneaking up on it. Plus, like we talked about, the more layers I put on this, there are in anything that we look at, there are really like thousands of layers of color and value and texture, and closer we get to it, the more we see that kind of thing. So if I put 2 colors on this or 3 colors on this, I'm literally doing this a disservice. I'm not really doing what's really there. What's making that look like what it really is. So that's where they just kind of I guess patience. Patience with it, and just kind of looking at it and letting your eyes and your brain just kind of slowly pick up what's going on there. Our brain is great at just putting all the info together really quick and telling you what that thing is. That's what our brain does. So it's like, oh, that's an apple because it's red. But then you start looking at it and it's not just red. There's all kinds of other colors. There are different shapes that make that red tint up. It just goes on and on. So the fun part about being an artist is really taking a step back. And actually, no. The fun part about being a human is that we can take a step back from all that, or actually a step forward, and really start to look at things and really just take the time to understand and take in what really is making that look like that. The best part about being an artist, if I come within like 80% of what's really there, hell, if I come within like 50% of what's really going on there, it's going to look like what it's supposed to. So you get by that hurdle early on in this. You know, if I get, like I said, I could do this in 3 colors and you'd still say, oh, that's the headlight of a motorcycle, because your brain would fill in all the rest of the brakes, all the rest of the missing info. You know, it would take its own memory of that item and then just kind of fill it all in. And a lot of painting is like that. You know, and that's great. That's, again, I can't say it enough. That's just a great way to paint, and a great way to enjoy art is, you know, it gives you the Reader's Digest version, and your brain kind of says, okay, that's what this is, and this is what's missing, and everyone has a great experience with it. So, but for me, again, I'm selfish. I want to be able to understand exactly what's going on there and see everything and try to translate it as closely to the real thing as possible, so that your brain still does the same thing. It's like, oh, you know, all that stuff put together, that's a headlight. So I know this one was, again, this open studio was long-winded and preachy, but again, it's been quite a year, and yeah, so thank you for enduring with me. All right, I am going to call it right there for this one. We are literally going to pick up right where we left off on the next one. So thank you again for jumping in on this open studio. Means the world to me. For the people who are telling other people about it and passing it on, it does not go unnoticed. The shares, the comments, I love it all. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. All right. So for Steve Leahy and Open Studio, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one. Thanks a lot.